Enemy number one, Admiral Kolchak and the Russian Civil War by Epic History. I think they've dropped the TV. So by Epic History, let's go. If you want to go see bonus content or extended content, go over to our Patreon. That link's in the description box down below. £3 a month. Crazy. But let's jump straight into this one, guys.
November 1918. In Western Europe, the 4-year slaughter of World War I is drawing to an end.
Okay.
But across the former Russian Empire, a new conflict has broken out. A civil war that rages from Central Europe to the Pacific and will claim an estimated 9 million lives. Lenin, the Bolsheviks, and their new Soviet Republic battle for survival against their many enemies, collectively known as the Whites.
Kolchak at the head.
The Whites' great hope, their newly appointed supreme ruler of Russia, Admiral Alexander Kolchak.
Okay, let's go.
He is a war hero, a man of duty and discipline, who believes above all in service to the motherland. Millions look to him to crush the Bolsheviks, avenge the murdered Tsar, and save Russia from chaos and collapse. This is the extraordinary tale of the life and death of Admiral Kolchak, Russia's only supreme ruler. In November 1918, a coup d'etat among white forces in Omsk brought Alexander Kolchak to power as supreme ruler of Russia. The 44-year-old admiral now wielded authority equal to that of a Tsar, with an absolute veto over all new laws.
Whoa. Very powerful man.
Despite his sudden elevation, Kolchak did not surround himself with luxury, nor move into a palace. He continued to rent a townhouse in Omsk and kept a careful eye on his expenses.
I wish I could do the same.
I wish
He
I
was
could.
joined in Omsk by his devoted mistress, Anna Timirova, who also worked as his translator.
Okay, interesting.
His wife and son, who he'd not seen in more than a year, were still in Crimea. They would soon travel to Paris, where many white Russians were now living as refugees.
Okay.
As supreme ruler, Kolchak faced challenges on a scale difficult to comprehend. And it was soon clear that he was neither a natural nor a sophisticated politician. His manner was stiff and severe. His sentences short and to the point. If he failed to get his way, he became frustrated and angry.
Yeah, he was a military general.
He clung rigidly to his own conception of honor, both for himself and for the motherland. He was, however, extremely hard-working, well-mannered, and could be personally kind and generous.
Interesting.
Kolchak's first priority was to have his position as supreme ruler recognized by the Russian people, the army, and other white Russian governments. Equally importantly, he needed recognition from the Allies, primarily Britain, France, and the USA.
Did you get it?
The previous week,
the
the
British
11th of November armistice effectively brought World War I to an end. And though fighting continued in many parts of Europe, the Allies would now be able to send far greater resources to support the Whites. However, the Allies no longer needed Russia to rejoin World War I. Now they were more interested in regime change, replacing the Bolsheviks with someone less hostile and more reliable. Initially, therefore, the Allies were alarmed by the unexpected coup that brought Kolchak to power.
I see.
He immediately set out to reassure them in his first proclamation. I will not go down the road of reaction or the ruinous path of partisanship.
Interesting.
My main objective is to build a combat-ready army, to defeat Bolshevism and establish law and order, so that the people can freely choose the form of government they wish.
Okay. So he's making it clear
Whether
he
Kolchak
just wants to
really
bring...
wanted democracy in Russia would never be put to the test.
I see, so we will never know if those words were true, but he
In
was just trying to say, I'm
white-controlled
trying to
areas
bring
of
order
Russia,
to
the
my,
response to
might
the
have
new
been
supreme
my
ruler
chaos-ridden
seemed
country.
broadly positive.
Yeah, there might have been truth to it, which we just won't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Conservatives welcomed the prospect of a strong leader after so much chaos. But the reaction was not long in coming. The left-wing groups that the coup had forced from power, the socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks, had not given up. They convened their own constituent assembly at Yekaterinburg, where Nicholas II and his family had been murdered by Bolsheviks just 4 months before.
I see, making a third player
This
into
assembly
the game, right?
refused to recognize Kolchak's new government
Right.
and called for resistance. In response, the supreme ruler ordered local Czech troops to arrest all its members. Several were later murdered during a revolt in Omsk, in which several hundred socialist revolutionaries were killed. Kolchak had shown himself unafraid to use his new dictatorial powers, and such firm action helped to shore up his position.
But also probably
On the
made the
other
West
hand,
not as happy.
the socialist revolutionaries, his allies in the fight against the Reds until a few weeks before, were now among his most bitter enemies.
So
They
even the
accused
West, but more
Kolchak
closer
of
to
wanting
home.
to make himself Tsar, which they declared made him an even greater threat than the Bolsheviks.
Ah, I see.
Elsewhere, white forces accepted Kolchak's authority. General Yudenich in the northwest, Marushevsky in the north, and General Denikin commanding the volunteer army in the south. Areas directly under Kolchak's control were effectively run by military government. Local councils could not be relied on due to their support for socialist revolutionary and Bolshevik policies, such as land reform. Instead, the whites banned trade unions and returned nationalized industries to private ownership. Wherever they encountered opposition, White Russian forces were ruthless.
Yeah,
When
this
an
is gonna
uprising
stir up a
broke
lot of
out in
issues.
Yenisei, Kolchak ordered that any village offering armed resistance was to be destroyed, burned to the ground, the men shot, everything of value seized.
Oh, he's acting ruthlessly. Too ruthlessly, in my opinion. What do you think?
He stands by his words.
He stands by his word. You
by his
can't
word.
argue about that. But yeah, it's a bit brutal.
Savage.
Savage.
Hostages were to be taken, and if locals cooperated with Bolshevik partisans, they were to be shot. In the process of crushing the Yenisei revolt, white forces executed an estimated 10,000 Russians, all in direct consequence of Kolchak's orders. The Bolsheviks were just as merciless in territory they controlled. Some historians differentiate between red and white terror during the Civil War. The Red Terror was directed from the top, an official policy of mass murder on class grounds. The White Terror was reactive, improvised, and usually carried out by local commanders.
Ah, I see.
It made little difference to...
So basically, like, the Red Terror was like the people at the top organising it, but yeah, the White one was like if a commander felt like they were insulted or something like that, they would issue them in to do something like that. Apparently, that's what
ordinary
the video's
Russians
saying.
who suffered untold miseries in this war and died in unimaginable numbers.
5 million civilian deaths, bro.
In economic terms, Kolchak had one advantage over the Bolsheviks. He controlled 2/3 of Imperial Russia's gold reserves, captured from the Bolsheviks, now stored at Omsk, 490 tons in all.
Lovely jubbly.
By
Taking
late
5 tons from running
1918,
away.
there were several Allied expeditionary forces in Russia to assist the Whites. More important than troops were the arms, ammunition and supplies they were sending, particularly Britain. But the support came with strings.
Okay, what strings were they?
Kolchak was informed by telegram that the Allies expected French General Maurice Janin, based in Vladivostok, to take overall command of all Allied and Russian soldiers.
What are you trying to achieve there? Because you're going to achieve nothing. You're going to achieve nothing. You want control over my men? Fuck off. Fuck off. You can take your own men. You can even take the Allied, if that's what they want. You can send bonus people, whoever you send over here, that's calm. But my men, I choose. It's up to me, not you. Do you know what I mean?
Why would he say that?
I don't know. Idiot. Never gonna happen.
Kolchak rejected the idea outright,
Really?
declaring
Yeah,
he'd
what a
rather
surprise.
have no foreign aid than submit to such a proposal.
Yep.
Big man.
Yeah.
Eventually, a compromise was reached. General Janin would command only the Czechoslovak Legion
Okay.
and some other small Allied contingents.
There you go.
Most of these would be held back to guard supply lines and railways,
So you do nothing.
while some historians believe Janin's wounded pride would later have bitter consequences for Admiral Kolchak.
Oh, let's see what they are then. On the offensive, let's go.
The war against the Bolsheviks was always Kolchak's overriding focus. His dream, the recapture of Moscow and Petrograd. From the provisional government, he inherited advanced plans for a major offensive aimed at Vologda. The goal was to break through to White forces near Arkhangelsk and gain access to Allied aid arriving via the northern ports.
Okay. But
The offensive began on the 27th
oh no, they are
of
going with
November.
that. How does it go?
The Whites' Yekaterinburg army faced the Third Red Army, which had been ordered to hold a 250-mile front, while suffering from serious shortages of fuel, food, and warm clothing.
Jesus.
Yeah, so the
attack
Whites are just
broke
stormed
through.
through.
The Reds were soon retreating with heavy losses. And on
But
the 24th of
they're making a
December,
counterattack,
the Whites
aren't they?
took the city of Perm. It was a major victory for Kolchak's forces. They had taken 30,000 prisoners, 120 artillery guns, 1,000 machine guns, and 9 armored trains. Eager
Okay.
to avenge this humiliating defeat, the Red Army launched a counter-offensive in January. But after small gains and huge losses on both sides, the attack
stalled.
bogged down.
Yeah.
The capture of Perm filled Kolchak and his generals with hope, and
Too
they
much hope,
organized
maybe?
a new large-scale offensive
Had to
for
be.
the spring
Yeah,
of
had to be.
1919. Their ambitious plan was to attack towards Vyatka and Saratov, break through the overextended Red Army center, and envelop Moscow from north, east, and south.
That's
Ambitious plan.
that's really ambitious.
It's ambitious, isn't it? It's not just me thinking the same. Thinking it, is it? Let us know if you think it's
Offensive
ambitious.
began in March, and soon White forces were advancing rapidly towards the Volga River. By
Okay.
the end of April, they'd advanced around 200 miles, capturing territory rich in
Nice.
industrial and agricultural resources,
Oh,
and
shit.
threatened
Yeah.
the cities of Kazan, Simbirsk, and Samara.
Threatened them though.
French Prime Minister Clemenceau and British Secretary of State for War Winston Churchill were among those who sent
got Willie.
congratulations to Kolchak. For the Whites, Moscow itself finally
Yeah,
seemed
they're getting
within
cocky
reach.
now though.
And with military success and renewed international backing, Kolchak's government had never looked stronger. The days of the Bolsheviks, it seemed, were numbered.
And how does it turn? Fighting retreat. Let's go.
Lenin and the Bolsheviks were deeply alarmed by Kolchak's success. But extraordinary measures had been taken, which would soon enable them to fight back.
Okay.
People's Commissar for Military Affairs, Leon Trotsky, had overseen the doubling in size of the Red Army within a year. Now 1.5 million strong, it was backed up by the full resources of the state, mobilized under a new policy of war communism. In April, Lenin declared Kolchak enemy number 1 of the Soviet Republic. All on Kolchak became the Bolsheviks' new slogan.
All on Kolchak.
The Red Army's Eastern Front received 2 new brilliant commanders, General Mikhail Tukhachevsky and Commissar Mikhail Frunze. In April 1919, they launched a counter-offensive with 80,000 troops. White Russian forces were soon in rapid retreat.
This is a big counter-offensive, Jack, isn't it?
On the 9th of June, Ufa fell, a crucial stronghold of the Whites. At the height of this crisis, Kolchak received a potential lifeline, an offer of military support that might turn the tables on the Reds.
But what's
Finland, ruled by Russia for 2 centuries, had declared its independence following the Bolshevik Revolution.
He wants it.
Finland's regent, Carl Gustaf Mannerheim, now offered to attack Petrograd with 100,000 troops. In exchange, he wanted Kolchak to recognize Finnish independence.
He's not going to give it up, is he? Yeah, it's...
Kolchak flatly declined.
Kolchak flatly declined.
Yeah.
Even in this desperate hour, he would not accept any dismemberment of Russia's historic empire.
I actually kind of respect that.
Yeah.
Because, of course, Finland is independent, and that's a good thing, and we're glad it happened. But it still shows that his morals, he stood for his morals more than power.
Yeah.
Because if he wanted the power and he wanted to win, then he would have gone, yeah, okay, it's fine. Better to control a large area with a slight area missing than not win. Do you know what I mean? Like I lose a little bit, but I get the rest. Yeah, okay. Calculate. If you're winning, if you're fighting for yourself, you're gonna take that. But if you're fighting for your belief and for your country, and you believe that's a part of your country, and then you're gonna say no. So I actually kind of respect that.
By August, the Red Army had crossed the Tobol River. But Kolchak had a plan. He was sacrificing territory for time to rest his troops and regroup.
Oh, okay. And how does this work?
As Supreme Commander-in-Chief, Kolchak would regularly visit frontline units to see conditions and speak with the men. He would bring extra rations of coffee, sugar and tobacco to lift morale. He spoke always of duty and the motherland. But small gifts and rhetoric could not compensate for his forces' increasingly dire situation.
He tried his best, though.
They were desperately short of supplies, including transport, fuel, clothing and weapons. A crisis partly caused by massive corruption and theft behind the lines. While the return
Still
of
an issue
Tsarist
today
era
in the
discipline,
Russian military.
which included flogging and beating soldiers, created further discontent. Desertions were rife, particularly among new conscripts from the peasantry, who had little reason to love the Whites.
Understandable.
In private, Kolchak was increasingly under strain and unable to control his temper. He looked visibly exhausted, and at 44, his hair had turned completely grey.
I mean, how many times did we say he didn't want to be there and he looked exhausted anyway? I'm just going to do that. Yeah, man. How many times did we see him? He just looked exhausted anyway. So you could tell that it was getting to him a lot.
44, your hair's gone grey.
44, your hair's gone grey. So peak.
I see you. You haven't liked the video yet. Why not? Go on. Go like it. While you're at it, you know you want to subscribe. And if you want to go to our social medias, all the links you need are in the description box down below. And you might as well head over to our Patreon as well, where you can get extra bonus content if you're enjoying this. That link's in the description box down below. But we'll get straight back into the video. Love you guys.
The rumours of morphine addiction were probably malicious gossip.
Okay.
But the supreme ruler had become erratic and agitated.
Interesting. What do you think, Jack?
That August,
Fair.
Kolchak threw himself into
I think he
planning a
probably
counter-offensive
Yeah?
to support General
Express his
Denikin's
real
thrust
thing.
on Moscow. Great hopes rested on its outcome. The attack began on the 1st of September. Initial indications were excellent. Kolchak's forces smashed through the Third Red Army, taking thousands of prisoners, advancing more than 100 miles, and driving the Reds back across the Tobol.
But it slows
The
down,
great
right?
encirclements Kolchak had planned, that were to annihilate Red forces on the Eastern Front, failed to materialize due to a lack of cavalry. At the Tobol River, the Reds were able to dig in and re-establish a defensive line. Kolchak's troops, exhausted by their advance and weakened by their own losses, could go no further.
No, they had to halt. Now we're going to the decline.
October 1919. Along the Civil War's Eastern Front, the ground shook with explosions as the Red Army launched yet another major offensive. The Whites fought stubbornly, but when the Reds captured bridgeheads across the Tobol, the decision was made to begin a strategic withdrawal. General Denikin's advance on
They
Moscow
literally pushed
also
too
came
far
under
forward and
fierce
now fucked up
counterattack.
himself entirely.
Everywhere, the Reds were advancing.
If he's able to hold
Omsk,
Omsk.
Kolchak's capital,
I
was
think
under
so.
threat. Kolchak wanted it held to the last man. If we lose Omsk, we lose all, he declared.
Because he doesn't have the money.
But the speed of the Reds' advance left no time to organize a proper defense.
It's that rapid.
The city was hurriedly evacuated on the 10th of November. Russia's gold reserves were loaded onto a Red Cross train and moved to safety, Kolchak having dismissed French General Jeannin's invitation to place them under international protection.
At least the French are just as bad as us for trying to rob shit.
They were robbing that
They're like,
shit.
yo, we can protect that shit. Yeah, you wanna put it on my train? Yeah.
I do not believe you, Kolchak told him. I would rather leave the gold with the Bolsheviks than give it to the Allies.
Nice. I kind of like
His
that.
words revealed how far trust had broken down between himself and General Jeannin.
Yep.
That's completely.
Yeah.
Kolchak hoped to establish a new defensive line along the Ob River, 370 miles east of Omsk. But by December, this line too was crumbling. A breakdown in relations with the Czechoslovak Legion was the final straw. These Czech troops controlled the Trans-Siberian Railway,
And they just
the
what,
vital
swapped?
artery
Or
to
just
the
gave up?
movement of troops and supplies. The Legion's officers now decided the evacuation of their own men would take priority over the movement of Kolchak's forces and supplies.
Kind of fair.
Kolchak
I don't
himself
know.
was traveling east on the Supreme Ruler's train, accompanied by the gold reserves. His destination was Irkutsk, where he planned to establish his new headquarters.
Okay.
No, what happened?
What happens? Because he doesn't want
Around
to give
him,
up.
the country was in chaos. White forces were in full-scale retreat. The government's authority had collapsed, and a typhus epidemic was spreading fast. Large areas were controlled by Bolshevik partisans or
Ah,
bandits.
yeah, he's got no
Famine
choice.
loomed.
He's gonna get assassinated for
On
sure.
the 25th of December, at Nizhny Udinsk, 280 miles short of Irkutsk, Kolchak's train was halted
Yep.
by Czech troops acting on General Janin's orders. He was held for 2 weeks with limited communications as chaos engulfed Siberia.
Did they just let him get captured?
While he waited, Bolsheviks and socialist revolutionaries launched a revolt in Irkutsk and took control of the city.
Oh no.
Now, even Kolchak's escape route was closed.
And so was the
Kolchak
Czech
was
troops,
now
right?
completely isolated.
He's fucked.
Yeah, he's fucked. But so
Military
was, like, the
disaster had
Czech
swept
troops.
away his forces. The Allies had lost patience with his failure to
I think
compromise.
so.
His authority had been destroyed. On the 4th of January 1920, at the insistence of his own Council of Ministers, Kolchak issued his last decree as supreme ruler, promising to resign in favor of General Denikin.
Okay.
With enemies on all sides, Kolchak planned to escape south into Mongolia, with the 60 officers and 500 men still under his command.
Okay.
How far does he get?
He announced that no man would be compelled to join this enterprise. He
Okay.
would accept only volunteers.
How many go with him?
At dawn the next day, of his 500 soldiers, only 10 remained. Kolchak saw
Wow.
the game was up, and on the advice of his officers, placed himself under the protection of the Czechoslovak Legion.
Okay.
Damn.
But what happens to him? The betrayal. Here we go. That's what's going to happen.
I think he gets betrayed.
Yeah. I guess so. Jack. Fucking dickhead.
10th of January 1920, Kolchak's train finally left for Irkutsk under Czech protection. These allies will sell me, Kolchak predicted to one of his generals. Sure enough, on arrival in Irkutsk 5 days later,
Yep.
Kolchak was handed over to the city's new Socialist Revolutionary Council.
So they could gain
The
passage.
Czechs claimed they had no choice. It was the only way to ensure their own safety as they escaped the country. But some Russian historians later claimed it was to cover up their own theft of Russia's gold reserves, which had been travelling with Kolchak.
That makes sense.
That makes sense.
This is almost certainly a myth, though legends
Oh.
about Kolchak's missing gold endure to this day.
Interesting. Okay, where did he go
The
though?
interrogation of Admiral Kolchak began on the 21st of January, 1920. He answered questions willingly, avoided implicating his subordinates,
Okay.
and took full responsibility for the actions of his government.
Just accepted his fate.
But the Bolsheviks had now taken control of Irkutsk,
Still
and he
can't
knew his
stick to his
prospects
word.
Yeah,
were
he
not
is.
good. He, after all, had instructed his own officers to shoot communist prisoners. The civil war must be merciless. Either we shoot them, or they shoot us.
He knows his fate.
But
Yeah.
then, suddenly,
Oh.
the hope of rescue. Several
is?
thousand troops loyal to the Admiral began a desperate advance on Irkutsk, aiming to free Kolchak and other white officers held there.
Okay.
They battled their way to within 5 miles of the city,
But
but they were massively outnumbered and outgunned. It was a gallant but doomed rescue attempt, and Kolchak's fate was now sealed.
tried.
In the early hours of the 7th of February, on the orders of the Bolshevik Military Revolutionary Committee of Irkutsk, Admiral Kolchak and the last Prime Minister of his government, Viktor Pepelev, were taken from their cells and led to the bank of the Angara River. An order was given. Platoon, against the enemies of the revolution, fire!
Yep. Kind
The
of
two
saw it
bodies
coming.
were pushed through holes in the ice and never seen again.
Damn.
Damn.
With the execution of Admiral Kolchak, the Whites' last pretense of unified national leadership was over. 1920 saw their defeat on all fronts. Western allies evacuated their few remaining troops from Russia.
Okay. They knew it was over.
And though fighting continued in corners of the new Soviet Empire for 3 more years, the ultimate victory of Lenin and the Bolsheviks was no longer in doubt. It came at an appalling cost. The Russian Civil
Appalling
War
cost.
was one of the deadliest conflicts in history, with an estimated 750,000 military deaths, 75,000 executions, 5 million civilian deaths from famine, and 3 million deaths from a typhus epidemic. The career of Admiral Kolchak,
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's like
Russia's
40 mil.
only supreme
It's
ruler,
insane, it's
and
nuts.
for more than a year, the world's great hope for defeating Bolshevism, had ended in total failure.
Yeah, he become a bit too much towards the end.
He had faced
Not willing to
extraordinary
fade, but I
challenges
liked it at the same time.
and shown himself a leader committed to duty, discipline, and his own imperial vision of his
Yeah.
Russian motherland.
He was stuck to that
He was a
belief.
skilled naval commander and charismatic figurehead,
Yes.
Yeah, man, the
but was
mind was
also
sick.
rigid and inflexible,
But that
unable
was
to
his downfall,
compromise
being rigid and
or
inflexible.
forge the alliances he needed to succeed. Under the Soviet regime, Admiral Kolchak's name was disgraced. An enemy of the people, a would-be tyrant in the mold of the Tsars, a traitor with no known grave. Today, a cross stands at the presumed site of his execution, and a memorial stands in Irkutsk.
Okay.
For some Russians, Kolchak remains a romantic, tragic figure who battled for an old empire and stood by his sense of duty to the bitter end.
That we can definitely
Admiral
agree on, I
Kolchak
think.
was and remains a deeply controversial figure in Russian history. To those on the left, he was a brutal reactionary. To those on the right, a
this an
true
advert?
patriot. As always, we've made great efforts to present an informed and balanced account by consulting multiple sources. The same
Yes, this is an advert. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Finishing that series off, part 2 all over and done with. I definitely preferred the first episode. It was a bit more entertaining finding
Yes.
his sort of origin story.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely glad that we got it all over and done with and that we enjoyed it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, you know what you need to do. You need to like, comment, subscribe. Head over to our Patreon. That link's in the description box down below. And we will catch you in the next video.
In a bit.
Also, go over to Epic History's channel.
Bollocks.
Go over to Epic History channel. That link's in the description box down below as well.